Welcome, everyone. Welcome on in. Today is one of those days when we have a guest. We absolutely love having guests. And I shall let her introduce herself to you. Go for it.
Hi everyone, my name is Irene Wamakau. I'm a Kenyan, currently living in Dubai. I'm a lawyer by training and incidentally was Shiro's classmate for years.
Yay, perfect. And today we are talking about, Irene has this amazing life story of moving around and going into all these different countries and doing all these different amazing things. And so this one is for you who has been sitting back and thinking, no, I can't move, or I'd love to move, but my circumstances don't allow it, or what does it feel like to live somewhere else? So this is all about that. Irene, where do you want to start off? When you left Kenya for the first time to work abroad, where did you go?
So my first move was, should I date myself, in 2006.
Nice. I never remember dates. I admire people who just pull dates out of their heads.
No, this one I remember very well. It was 2006,
Mhm.
January.
Okay.
I was a management trainee in this organization, and they said, "Hey, we've got a project, and we're looking for somebody to move to South Africa. It's for 1 year with stints in India." And I was like, "Sounds interesting. Let me go." By the way, I didn't know what the project was about. Please remember, I'm a lawyer on a management trainee program, so God knows what I'd be assigned to do. So I was like, let me put up my hand. We might be 15 others, and then, they'll filter us. Shock, I was the only one. So guess what? They picked me.
Were you the only one who applied?
I was the only one that applied. I was the only one that put up my hand.
Wow.
Yeah,
Which already is saying something. I do think that there is this notion of exactly what you said. Someone else will get it. So, but that you put your hat in the race, that's really good. Yeah.
yeah. And the interesting thing was, I also didn't know what happens like when you're sent abroad by your organization, right?
Yes. Yes.
Those are the good old days of expat life when they
Wow.
take care of your accommodation, your travel plans, um, and all you have to worry about is food. I didn't
Yes.
know all of that. I just put up my hand and I was like, okay, let's see. So
Let's
they
go.
tell me what I need to provide. I provided. And then, they came and said, okay, this is your start date. That was then also the time we were being admitted to the bar. So I was like, it's no problem. I
Oh
need to delay
wow.
my start date because I need to be admitted to the bar first.
Yes. Oh wow. Uh-huh.
So I went, I did my bar admission, at the end of January. And I think 2 days later, I was on a plane and off to South
Nice.
Africa. Yeah.
And was this your first time out of Kenya?
It was my first time out of Kenya for work and for a long time. I think the only
Oh,
other place I had been, no, I had been to other places through Rotary. So
nice.
it wasn't technically my
The first time.
first time to be on a plane out of the country. Before I
Okay.
had gone on holiday or on Rotary. Yeah.
What feedback did you have from your family?
So growing up, my dad traveled a lot
Uh,
for his job and
mm,
always came back with these flags of the country that he'd been to, showing the sites of interest, right? So it would be a picture with, if it's the Duomo or whatever, and they would be hung around the house. And I was always like, I want to collect more than my dad.
nice.
So, for me, it was just that in the back of my mind. But at that time, was that what I was thinking? Not at all. I was just like, there's an opportunity. Let's go. Let's see what it does,
Why
right?
not?
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's how I found myself out there.
And just for the people listening, as Irene said, we were in the same school. So the rest of us, some of us were not even thinking about management training. We were just I don't even know what I was. I think I was doing maybe my pupillage or something like that. So just really more narrow focus. So by the time that you are already so broadly minded is already quite a plus because that shows that you are looking for opportunities where the rest of us hadn't even put our heads up to notice they existed.
So I think that's accidental. I should take all the credit and credit myself for being forward thinking, but I was not.
Mhm.
So I was working for the government at that time and did my pupillage with the government at the Attorney General's office, and I'd been assigned to one of the entities. And there, as usual, there was a stint when, there was no budget for us to do what we needed to do. So you sort of came in the morning and just sat in the office doing absolutely nothing.
Okay.
And so I was just like, man, I need to do something. So I decided that I was going to go and study because the government gave a lot of programs or scholarships at that time. So I was like, I'll look that up and apply. But while at it, a friend of mine sent me a message and said, hey, there's a job that I think you'd be great at. And it was a link to the management trainee program of that institution. And I said, doesn't hurt, let me apply. So I applied, and they had said that they prefer people with finance degrees. Me and my legal degree, I'm there. We're just applying. So I applied, we went, the program, the interview process was quite rigorous, right? So you did math exams. Me and math were like this, or were like this.
Math exams.
So we had one of those for calculating interest and stuff like that. We had aptitude tests, like I think it was 3 days of assessment or something like that. And then, I get this call. Was it an email? I can't remember. And those days was when you'd go to the cyber to check your email. So it's not like you had
Good
email
old
on.
days. I'm sure some of us listening are wondering, what do you mean? What is a cyber cafe? People keep
So I get told, hey, or maybe they called me, I can't remember. So I'm told, hey, we've taken you in. I was like, what? Okay, cool. And that was in 2005. So we technically had finished our pupillage and people were doing holding over, right? If you recall, we had a very long wait between sort of when you finish pupillage and when you transition. So,
and for those people wondering what pupillage is, it's like the internship you need to do after finishing law school and before getting admitted in the bar in Kenya. So it's a mandatory thing if you want to be an advocate. Yeah.
Correct. So that was that process. And it was really important for me to do that pupillage to complete your qualification, because I think a lot of people complete the degree but don't get the qualification. And I always say you can take it and pack it. One day it will become valuable. So for me, that was really important. And so here I started my journey as a management trainee, and we did everything. I did cashiering because it was at a bank. I did cashiering. We did sales. We did
cashiering, meaning that you are at the bank, you're the person getting the money. Is that cashier?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Giving people money, taking money, balancing at the end of the day to make sure you didn't make a loss.
Did it ever go short? I always imagine just losing money as a cashier and what that would mean.
I think I lost 50 bob, if I recall, but I was always, I found that I over panicked, right? And that also moved when I went to work in the treasury department, where we sold for FX, foreign currency. And, you worried that everyday stuff will not reconcile. And also because it was manual, you wrote the slips of what your trade was, and somebody in the back end went to balance it off. So if you wrote the wrong thing, you could have ended up in a short. So those 3 months in the treasury department, I think I had ulcers. I was just like, every night I'd go through my transactions. So anyway, finally finished and went to work. And so this stint in South Africa, I was still on the management trainee program. So I had enrolled off the program, and that's how I moved to South Africa, and it was to do product development. And product development is saying, for example, if you're doing a trade product, designing that product, looking at the documentation that the clients will use, and also the system configuration. So testing the back end, so user acceptance testing, really stuff that I had not learned in school and was learning on the job, So yeah, that's how I found myself in South Africa.
But what was your first impression? You've just landed in South Africa. Maybe you stayed there for like a week. Do you remember what's the first thing that hits you about this country?
So when we had joined as management trainees, we used to go a lot for training in South Africa. So this wasn't, I was not landing there fresh. Okay. So I sort of knew certain places, but there were obviously malls, because those days shopping was, be it all you ever did. So it wasn't really foreign for me, but visiting and living in a place are two very different experiences, right? So now it was learning where the most convenient supermarket is. And I recall the first 2 weeks, because I was used to a 24-hour economy in Kenya where you work late and then you go and find the supermarket. Shock on me. The supermarket would be closed. The mall would be closed at 5 o'clock, because I was working until 5 o'clock. So for the first few weeks, my dinner was made of tea and some biscuits that were in there, right? Yeah, I didn't have eggs and everything. So of course, by the time now you learn that there are convenience store that are in the sort of a petrol station, and you can be able to go and get something there, was when I bothered to mention to a friend of mine, you guys, your shop's closed late. So of course the guy laughed at me and was like, no, you can get, here is a convenience store, and also maybe on the weekend, don't be going out to eat and party. At least go and do your groceries within that time. So
Practical tips.
yeah. So so that was so landing, that was the first thing. Then after that, obviously it was more organized and efficient than the Kenya of that time.
Yeah.
The other thing that I remember was to drive around, because these are not roads you're used to. We had the yellow directory, which was the map. It was a book this thick. And so you had to find Johannesburg Airport, and you had to find it on the map. And so as you're driving, you go and try and locate it.
Wait, a map that you open like this, those maps are the ones that you're talking about, and then you're looking through where you're going.
Yes. Now, please remember my geography. I had dropped geography in Form 2 because I struggled to use a string to find my location. The number of times I got lost off the highway.
Oh my God.
So I used to be like, let me tell you, driving is going to be minimum. If my friends wanted us to get together, they would come pick me up, then we go wherever we're going. So I was not driving that much. Then Kenyans would be visiting.
I've never really thought about that aspect, because I lived in South Africa myself before I came to Sweden. And for me, those are, of course, the days of
GPS.
Yeah, exactly. GPS, not even the one on the phone, just, Google Maps. So it was just after, I think it's just when, so it's fairly recently from that perspective. And even then, I'd get lost so often because I'd be arguing with a girl, turn left, and I'm like, no. And she's like, no. But now I cannot begin to imagine driving somewhere in a foreign country.
GPS.
Oh my God.
And then they had evolved to GPSs that used to be a gadget that you could put on the car.
Yeah.
So after some time, I sort of got myself one, but my friends had come to visit, and I remember we were going somewhere out for dinner. And as we are driving, I'm seeing the arrow on the road pointing towards me, and I exclaimed, I'm like, guys, why is the arrow on the road pointing towards me? Anyway. We were very lucky that there was no oncoming traffic, and we were able to turn back.
Hey, okay, you've lived life.
Yeah, it was some fun times.
You've lived life.
Yeah.
I got lost, and it's silly. Even with the era of Google Maps and everything, I went out for dinner as well in South Africa when I was more or less also newly there, and my phone ran out of charge. And I told someone to please explain to me how to get home. And he drew for me a map. And then he told me exactly what I'm meant to do. And then he made one, he assumed that I would assume something that I didn't. So I got one turning wrong. I tell you, I drove and drove and drove, and then it started getting dark. And then I'm asking myself, where am I going? I ended up having to stop by in a petrol station, and it was late, and it's in a Joburg that's not necessarily always safe. So I was just asking myself, when I get into this petrol station, what's going to happen? Then I realized you either go home or you don't. Then I went in with my charger. I think I didn't have the phone charger. So I just went there and asked them if they can charge my phone for me. And they just looked at me, and I think they could just tell this chick is so lost. They were very nice. They let me charge my phone. And after that, I figured that I was going way off in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that happened to me so many times, but it's life.
Yeah. So there you are. You've mentioned that it would have little stints in India. So you're in South Africa learning these strange new things that were not at all taught in your legal degree course. And then you have a little...
So every so often would have to spend, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks in India, in that duration, like going to work with the team in India that was helping us on the back end of the product development work that we were doing. So living in India was a bit of a different experience, because actually the entire time we stayed in a hotel, nice fancy hotel, I must say. Obviously, my palate was inexperienced from being defaulted to gali, githeri, and such like things, to instantly moving to curries, which are, really hot. So like that was the first adjustment, getting there. I think also the first time I got there was the monsoon season, and normally I like walking, so I was walking to the office. Walk to the office, it's nice and dry. Walking back from the office, my God, it had rained. So I'm wading in water and I
Oh,
have open shoes. It was a disaster.
oh,
Let's just say I don't like talking about that experience because it was not really nice.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
And then also I think that time there weren't very many Africans sort of always been seen, in the streets of Mumbai. So flagging a taxi was always an extreme sport. And they would stop and
Oh,
then they'd look at me and then they'd drive off. So if it was at the hotel, I'd always get picked up. At the office, unless I had a colleague helping me, it was a disaster. And of course, we didn't have Uber, so you had to flag the taxi on the road, right?
wow.
So it was always interesting. And then what I found was at the weekends, I just walked around. I was like, nobody's going to give you a ride, so just walk. And
Oh,
so I really
wow.
discovered the streets of Mumbai that way.
Okay.
And it was great, just discovering the streets, discovering, just nice shopping centers with fabric and, small things that I liked. And did that stint for the full year. So went back with 3 weeks, staying there for 3 weeks, going back to Joburg, going back again for 3 weeks. So it wasn't unlike Joburg where it was home. It was more you went, but you lived there for three weeks, right? So you
Okay.
did have to have a routine outside of work or stuff that you had to do. What do you
Okay.
do in your weekends? But it was really great staying at a nice hotel because that took away the stress of sort of everyday living in a very, very foreign country.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you feel safe when you're walking around in these small streets? Because you mentioned you're the
Yeah,
only black face, maybe for some distance.
I,
And a
I
girl at
didn't
that.
feel unsafe.
Oh, good.
I
Yeah.
didn't feel unsafe at all. It was just that people wouldn't talk to you or um, you know, they'd speak back to me in a language I wouldn't understand. And I'm like,
Mm,
yep,
fine.
sure.
Oh, fine. Okay. Okay. All right. So we've done South Africa, we've done India. What is our next escapade?
So years later, I moved back to Kenya after a year. And one thing I want to say is in South Africa, I developed really a great community. So the organization I worked for at the time had a lot of Kenyans that were working there, and they were really amazing people. So like they bring you out to dinner and stuff. And so in time, I created my own community out of those connections, and a lot of those guys were friends to date, and
Oh,
that made the
nice.
stay really useful,
Mm,
really really great because you've got a community that you get to spend time with on the weekends or even during the week, and you catch up and you ask each other what's going on. Of course, we didn't have WhatsApp then, so it was more, you're on text or you join each other on the call, and you're like, "What's the plan for Thursday?" But I really had a grand time. I must say, I had a really grand time in South Africa. So I moved back at the end of the year. I moved back. I'm now finishing my 2 year stint as a management trainee. And then so I ended up moving back to the legal department. So fast forward, I didn't travel again until I think 2009. Again, very accidental. We're in the office. My boss is saying, I need somebody to go to Tanzania and cover off because the person working in, the head of legal in Tanzania is going on maternity leave. We were a small department. My colleagues are like, yeah, no, we're not going. I was like, oh, okay, I can go. And I was
nice.
the junior most lawyer, right? So, I probably wasn't at the level that my boss was looking for, but it worked, So he said, cool.
Yeah.
You're sure you want to go? I said, yeah. Uh, I was the junior most in the function. So
Yes.
imagine I'm like, okay, I can go and be the head of legal, in
I
Tanzania.
really I love your confidence. I love two things: your confidence and also your ability to put your hand up. Because you don't seem you're not so concerned about the unknown. It's like the unknown will figure itself out. You just have this an adventurous spirit that just seems that's taking you places.
You know, sure, I don't know that I'd call myself adventurous one. But in hindsight, when I think about it, it's that. But for me, it was always, what's the worst that can happen? The guy
There
would
you
say
go.
no. he'd be like, I'm not sending you, let me look for another lawyer. That's the worst that can happen. I would say when it comes to career, some choices I don't really overthink them, but others I overthink. So,
Okay.
and I think when I was much younger, I didn't overthink. So it was more of what's else that can happen. They'll say no, and I said to myself, I'll not be devastated. It's not like I was trying to go to the States. It's just Tanzania, you know. So here I am, off to Da. Um, Newly married at the time. I'd been married like a year and a half, a year and some months. And so off I went to Da. Went there again. Luckily, there
So did
were
you go with your
colleagues.
husband?
No,
With your freshly minted new husband, fresh off
no.
the. Yeah.
I didn't, unfortunately, I didn't even think of that. I was like, look, you don't append other people's lives and move because you've made that decision. So, and I find that I've always made that decision to say, it's you, and how do you then make that work? So, one, I up and went. And for me, the theory was it's close enough that you can come back often or he can come
Yeah.
back often. And that's really how we made it work.
Mm.
But getting into that, I had colleagues that I had worked with in Kenya that had since moved to Dar, so settling wasn't too difficult. I had friends that I knew who were working for other companies, and so the social life, which really is important in a foreign country, was
Absolutely.
nicely anchored. And so, got in different ways of working, different cultures. Remember, here you're not being directed how to do things; you're having to show leadership. So I think that was probably
Mm.
the bit that was a bit of an adjustment for me to make. Very different work cultures, and how do you learn to influence? And so developing that skill of leadership, as opposed to
Nice.
where you're the doer and then you're like, it is what it is. Now
Yeah.
you really have to think, what does this mean? And I was really lucky because my colleagues who were there were really seniors already. They were heads of department, and so held my hand, and I could talk to them and tell them, hey, this happened, what do I do? And they'll be like, don't worry, we've seen this before. This is how you go through it. So there also a lot of my leadership journey got shaped, working through crisis and working through difficult moments. So yeah, again, did that stint. It was a 4-month stint as head of legal. And then it was time to go back to Kenya at the end of the year.
I can't imagine. I find Dar such a party town. I can't imagine working in Dar. It's just, I find it so. I mean, of course, I've only ever gone there for partying, so perhaps that's the reason. What's the serious side of Dar like? Is it serious people, serious all the time? I should stop going to the clubs and
There's
go to the
always a
office.
work culture, right? So
Mm.
for me, the biggest thing I always say is your experience socially is never going to be your experience living there, right?
Mm.
As a professional, or even living there as a trailing spouse, right? The experience is always going to be different. So there
Okay.
is a business culture compared to other countries that I've lived in, where it's when you meet people, all they talk about is their work. That wasn't the case. When you met people at the weekend, they were not obsessed about, oh my God, work is this, work is that. It was, let's sit, let's enjoy, let's distress. Monday's gonna come and it's the next life. So Monday to Friday was busy. It wasn't back in the time as intense. Maybe things have changed now, but there wasn't an intensity that I've since experienced later in life. And there's a nice social balance. So, that was great. So, yeah, it was quite balanced, I would say.
Yeah.
And obviously, the nightlife is unparalleled, right?
Nice. And I'd want to just note something that you mentioned that I think is very important. You were stepping into a leadership position and weren't too sure how to go about it. And you allowed yourself to be vulnerable enough with your colleagues who already knew the ropes and told them that this is places that I need help in, and allowed them to show you instead of buffering up and saying, I know everything, I don't need help. I think that must have really helped you in the process.
Yes, but I think, let me say, one is these people had been sort of folk who interviewed me as a management trainee. Remember, I started way back as a management trainee. So the relationship was always one of learning. At no point did I feel, oh my God, now they're my peers. And for me, I was always like, I look up to you guys, show me the way, show me the
Nice.
ropes. So there was no,
Nice.
I don't know, and oh my God, I'll keep it to myself. No.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now we've done that. Well, where do we go next?
So yeah, fast forward. I think that was 2009. So fast forward, I've left that organization, moved to another organization, into leadership positions, and at this point, I'm looking after Africa. In my new position, legal and compliance. I've now also moved into a new field, compliance. My previous organization, I was just looking at legal. So I then moved to a different organization, and this is 4 years into the new organization. And I found myself restless, which is something that hadn't happened before. I found myself quite restless, and I was like, man, I can do this job with my eyes closed. I've built credible networks. People don't doubt my capability, and I was beginning to feel like I was being disruptive, rather than being an enabler. And I was like, maybe I need to do something different. And at that time, the organization was also undergoing a global change. So, getting a new role was perhaps not what was available. So I shared this with a colleague, and the colleague said, why don't you look at a short-term assignment where you go and work in a different department and then sort of come back? So I went and spoke to my boss, and I said, I'm really thinking about doing something different. I want to do a short-term assignment. And they said, where? And I said, the States. And the reason I said the States was very simple. I was like, it is so difficult to go to the US. I'd never had a visa at that point. I was like, it may be easier to go through my employer.
Yep.
And I was like, maybe it won't happen, but I said the US. I did not know which team. I did not know what project, nothing. I just selected a country.
You had that where?
Worst case scenario, they'll say no.
I love this.
Shock on me. They came back and they're like, oh, actually, we have this ongoing project. It's a remediation project. Do you want to go and be part of it? I said, sure. And so we started the visa process.
I love this. Yeah.
We started the visa process. And at this point, by the way, I have a child. I think my son at that point was like 4 years old. So here I am. I've put up my hand. I have no idea what's going to happen when they tell me, okay, now you're leaving tomorrow, because the visa process takes a bit of time. And then the visa came, and I'm like, okay, I need to tell this child I'm going. So a 4-year-old doesn't have the concept of there's going to be distance and all of that stuff. So I remember telling him, Mama is going to go. I'm going to get on a plane, and I'll be away. I think the stint was 3 months, 4 months. And he's like, okay, Mama. And then I left. And it was
what was
hard.
that like for you? The process of telling him, the process of deciding, then telling him, then going. What was that like for you from your perspective?
So first of all, I made the decision when I asked to go. So going, I was going. It wasn't that now the visa is here and I'm changing my mind. No. Going, I was going.
Yes.
So speaking to him, he's a 4-year-old. So it's not like he's going to tell me, Mama, you shouldn't go. No, I'm going to go. So, it's more I'm informing you.
The messaging, it's yeah.
But then it was really hard. You get there, you try to call a child, and he's not attentive. You barely get all of 2 minutes. I can't remember then. We could do video calls. And so you finish the call and you're just feeling so heartbroken. 4-year-olds are so sweet. So he'd write me notes and be like, hi, Mom, I love you. Oh, and I'd look at the notes and I'd be very happy. And I still keep, those pictures of some of the notes that he wrote. So that was really hard. And obviously the US was different. The US is, and I was in New York, which was really, a fantastic capital to work at. And it's full on Monday to Friday. Guys are like, hey, we're going, it's hectic pace, and had never been a pace I'd been used to. And then on the weekend, everybody's got stuff that they have to do with their family. And so weekends, I'm like, so now what am I supposed to do?
Yes.
There's no, I didn't form I'd say I didn't form like a social network that I'd done in Dar and in South Africa. However, I had a friend growing up that would have been very close from when we were kids, and she was in New York, and so it was really great. Actually, on my first day, she came and picked me up, and we went to New Jersey together. I have pictures of me falling asleep on the train, and she had been telling me, "Don't sleep the whole day. Don't sleep, even if you feel tempted." Jet lag was real, man. Of course, that was my first time to interact with jet lag, and I kept feeling like I'm dying. you know.
I,
At the same time, I was doing an online program, which was really hectic and intensive. So I'm reading, I'm working full time. I've got to submit assignments, and it was crazy, but we got it done. Second thing was, this was during, I sort of got in as fall was beginning, so it was nice weather, and then it changed dramatically. So in Kenya, I don't have to look at the weather app. Okay,
no.
nowadays I have to, but those days it was relatively consistent. If it's hot, it's a hot day the whole day. It won't suddenly rain at
Yes.
night,
Yes.
So I wake up in the morning and I head out to the office, because where I lived, the train connection wasn't great. I'd have to go past the office and then come back,
Okay.
So what I did is I'd walk. So I walked a lot in New York. So I'd walk to the office in the morning, nice walk, 20 minutes walk to the office, get in, and I do my work. Open plan, so I'm like in the middle. I don't have, the window to look at. So I get cracking, and then I'm like, it's suddenly dark. I look, and it's just like 3, 4 p.m. There was a storm.
Ooh, yeah.
So I look, and everybody has left. I'm the only one working late. And remember, as I've they're commuting 1 hour. Mine is like a 20-minute gig. Let me tell you, I walk out and it's raining cats and dogs, and it is windy. There's a full-on storm. My shoes are walking shoes, storms, so they're going to be rained on, and they're soaked in properly.
Yes.
So anyway, I decide, you know what, I'll make a
You see
dash
how your
for it
experience
to
from India had helped you?
totally different. This is just pure foolishness. So I make a dash to Macy's. I get in, and one of those ladies looks at me, is like, "What the hell is wrong with you, madam? You're gonna get sick. Please come, let's help you." Let me tell you, she helped me. She took me. She's like, "I'll get you a coat that's on offer." And I really got a really nice coat that was on offer. It was water resistant, so if it got rained on, it was no issue. It was my first designer jacket, I must say, that was a total steal. And she was like, "And you need to change your clothes." So went and got me clothes and all of that stuff. And she's like, "Do you
That's
have
so
warm
nice.
clothes?"
Oh.
Oh, bless that woman. So, got me thermal wear and stuff like that. And I was like, what fresh hell is this? Anyway, managed to walk home in the rain, and got me boots, managed to walk home in the rain, and I got home. And I was like, what is this? So I called my friend in New Jersey. I'm like, chick, what gives? She's like, oh, you didn't check the weather app? Yeah, we became friends with the weather app. So
No. But and that's the thing, I guess, because your colleagues would have assumed that you've checked the weather app. You must, I mean, that's why they left without telling you. Like, who doesn't do that? How would you live your life without checking the weather app?
And remember, I'd had 2 fantastic weeks where this wasn't an issue. I'd go in, I'd walk back, go in, walk back. So it just happened suddenly. But I mean, when I started reading up, I learned there was no such thing as suddenly. There is a storm season in the US. So you have to be aware and know that that's the time that's going to happen, So, yeah, I really learned
That's
about
something
adjusting
else.
to the weather. So
No.
that was something.
You remind me when I came to Sweden, I came the last week of August, and it was lovely, beautiful, sunny weather. And I swear it was like the weather had a calendar, because on the 1st of September, it just suddenly changed. The sun was not seen again, I think, for quite some time. And then it was cold. And I was like, people, I was like, why are we checking the weather app? What's going on? So I'm just like, but why is it suddenly cold forever? So now you realize that almost every day in the office, the conversation has to pass by the weather. That it's going to be sunny in 2 days. That's
And before I used to be like, what is this obsession with the weather? Why do people talk about it? Now I know. Now I know. It's a
Exactly.
thing.
That's the thing. I remember a conversation which was Chimamanda, and Chigozi. It was a talk about something or other, and then she was saying about how in her childhood she used to read these books and storybooks,
Yes.
your famous five and the type, and wonder why these people were so obsessed with the weather.
Yes.
But as you say, I mean, in Kenya we are fine. You go out. I visited home, and then I was telling guys here in Sweden, I was telling them there was sun every day, every day there was sun. And they couldn't imagine, what does that mean? How can you just know that the weather is going to be nice?
And it's
Yeah,
going to be
that's right.
consistent. There's consistency, you know?
There you go. There you go. Ah,
Yeah.
great. And something else I
So
want to touch on is you mentioned a jet lag. I have traveled a little, I mean, I've traveled quite a bit, but I came to realize I've always traveled within this corridor of Africa going up, Africa and Europe. So it was only last year was my first trip to the US. Ah, jet lag. I was there for like, I think it was 10 days. And I took like the first 7 days trying to adjust to the time. Then when I finally adjusted to the time, then I'm back in Sweden. Then I'm taking another week to adjust
7 days.
again. I was
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. You just feel tired and sleepy, and because your clock is at the time of the country that you've come from. So it's just taking you a long, long time to figure out how to live your life in this new space when it's sunlight,
Yeah.
but you feel like you want to sleep. Yeah.
I think and I think over time as you travel to different countries, because then I experienced it again when I moved to Singapore. Um, you also learn that there are actually coping mechanisms with jet
Mm,
lag,
mm,
which you sort of didn't know, but learn over time.
okay.
So yeah, but the first time you experience jet lag, man, it's a killer. After that, you know, you adjust, and people ask you, "Are you dealing with the jet lag?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm trying. I didn't sleep last night, but you know, we try again today." So it becomes a way of life.
And I guess what your friend told you was one of them. Yeah, the day you arrive, you're not meant to sleep during the day. You just have to wait it out until the night. Is that one of them?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's one of them. The other thing is that they've got supplements that help you in the process,
Mm,
that are not medical type of
mm.
aids. So I'm not a fan of those, but you know, there is ways to do it. Magnesium is another thing that you can take that helps
Ah,
you sort of get through. So there are options. There are
okay.
options in the market
You
now
don't
that
have to
help
die.
you. No.
Nice, nice, nice. So you mentioned Singapore. Is that your next stint?
Yes, so I actually before Singapore, I head back at the end of, and that's interesting. All my moves have been at the end, you know, sort of end at the end of the year, calendar year. So
Okay.
I head back in November, December. No, actually, I head back on Thanksgiving. I remember going, telling my boss, "No, I'm coming back early. There's no need for me to stay because my stint was ending um, 30th of November. So I was like, I'm out. And I really want to go home now. I was terribly homesick. Other stints, I don't know why it wasn't as bad, but I think this time because there's a child involved, you know, I
Yeah.
just was terribly homesick and wanted to be home. I had been able to go home in between the stints that I'd been there at the halfway point. So, you know, but now I was ready to go home. So I headed back home. As I'd said, the organization was going through a change, and now I had responsibility over Africa and Middle East. And I told my boss, look, I'm not going to move to the UAE. We're going to do this role out of Kenya. And he says, no problem. Let's see how it goes. So that's end of 2015. By the time we got to mid 2016, he was like, you're moving to the UAE.
Yes.
And I didn't want to move.
Mhm.
So
And like,
anyway, packed up
for
my
the first
bags.
time, you're like, I'm not moving.
Yeah, for the first time, I was just like, I don't want to do this. Anyway, so I pack up my stuff and moved to the Middle East. Again, other than the US, I had been to the UAE before for work meetings and stuff. So anyway, pack up my stuff and I come. The difference with this stint was that I traveled so much for work, so I was barely here because I'm now in Dubai again. I was barely here. So when I think back to that stint, one, I didn't make a social network because I was hardly in the country. Two, I, my heart didn't want to be here, and I can't tell why I didn't want to be here. Because when I think about it, I can't tell why. And so 2016, 2017, I was just like, I need to get something different. I need to go somewhere else. It wasn't where I wanted to be. The country was great, obviously materially different from what it is now. I cannot tell you what it looked like outside of the office and my apartment, which was
Wow.
8 minutes door to door walking. I was very clear about that, so I never had a car, so I never had to drive around. I did taxis if I needed to drive around, which was to a mall and back. I sort of didn't understand that there were other things that you could do in the UAE that were not necessarily touristy. And like I always say, living and visiting a place are very different.
Yes.
So that since 2016, 2017 was a blur for me. I traveled a lot. My colleagues at work, used to joke that I should convert my apartment to an Airbnb because I was hardly hardly in. And then, around July of 2017, I got an opportunity in Singapore where my boss said, "Hey, we've got this gig," and I had been interviewing for months. And I got the gig as a global head of compliance for one of the business units. But I didn't move because the deal with my then boss was I needed to complete the year and we had to find somebody to replace me. So I stayed on in my role till the end of the year while traveling back and forth into Singapore for like big strategic meetings, conferences, workshops, and stuff like that. So there was sort of a more interesting move in terms of knowing the country before I had actually made my move
Okay.
into the new location.
Nice. So are you the kind of person who had a bag that was ready set? Because you were traveling so much. Did you have a bag that was constantly packed?
Yes, actually,
Ah,
I did. And remember, I at this point still have a child, right? Who I
mm,
have left in Kenya.
okay.
So I flew a lot via Nairobi because I covered Africa and Middle East. So to the countries that I flew in, which were largely in Africa, I flew via
Okay.
Nairobi. So I would have a bag that was either ready in Nairobi or in the UAE to pick for the next
Nice.
destination. Um, Travel is, and this is from a place of privilege. When you're doing it intensively, it can be a lot and can be
Mhm.
draining. You wake up and you're like, where am I? You're a bit
Wow.
disoriented.
Mm.
And I also think because at that time, I just wanted to move roles desperately. Um, I think I was just in the wrong mindset at that point.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So now
Yeah.
we're in Singapore. We are waiting to go to Singapore.
Yes. So now this was very interesting because remember all my other moves, I moved with a suitcase.
Mm.
And also
Oh,
the move to Dubai was I moved with a suitcase and then I bought
you
furniture
went to
there.
South Africa for a year.
Even to South Africa because I got a furnished apartment. So I just moved with a suitcase and it was
Ah,
1 year. So I was not going to create a home.
yeah.
So now the move to Singapore is different. I have an apartment that I had to furnish in Dubai. It was a 1 bedroom apartment, just my bed, my TV, dining table, and a sofa, and my kitchen stuff, basic. I had never packed up because I think the last time I had moved in Kenya was, eons ago.
Ah,
So,
lucky you.
I'd totally forgotten. Number two, the packing up and moving experience in Kenya is very different from, overseas. So I was learning every day. They're like, okay, the movers are going to come. They're going to do a survey. I'm like, why can't they just come and pack up stuff? So they come, they do a survey. They're like, oh, it's going to take X number of hours. I'm like, do I need to be there when you guys are packing? Yes, you have to be there. I'm like, you're killing me. I'm just going to sit and be idle. Anyway, we go through that process and pack up. But in between, obviously, I have gone and done what they call look-see in Singapore, which is you sort of go and look at schools. So
Mm.
I've gone along with my 6-year-old son, who is saying, why are we moving? I don't want to move from Kenya. I'm very happy where I am. Mom, this is not for me. And of course, you try to bribe him by taking him to, Universal Studios where there are the rides and you're showing him it's going to be nice and fun and all of these things. My son, who's truly my son, is stubborn. He's like, that's good. Maybe you move because it's you who's interested in this gig, not doing it.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
Yeah.
um, and we have to do the school, the school laps, going around and looking at schools. So you identify the school, then you can figure out actually where do you live. And we go and look at schools. In some schools is considered young, in some schools are like they don't have a space. And then we get to the school where when we land, the guy is tired because remember, jet lag is real and jet lag hits different when you're a child. So we get to the school and the boy falls asleep while we're waiting, outside the head teacher's office and, falls on the sofa and we leave him there. So we go off to look at the school and they give us the tour. When we finish, we come back, we find our child is missing. So they tell us, no, 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 no. We took him for his tour. I said, what? A 6-year-old. What decision is he going to make? They're like, no, 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 we want to show him the facilities. Anyway, we sit patiently and we're like, I really hope my child comes back in one piece.
Yeah.
So anyway, in this rolls this young man, with I think it was the deputy head teacher who was giving him the tour. And so I asked him, and we had seen so many schools. So this was the last that we were seeing. So I'm like, hey, dude, how was it? And he's like, oh, actually, the school is nice, mom. I think I can see myself in this school. It was nice. I was like, wow, thank
What
you.
happened?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, sorry, we left you while you're asleep. It's like, oh, no problem. Miss So and so was very nice to me, and they walked me around. And I was like, oh, thank God. And so, we head back to the hotel, and he's like, mom, just because I like the school doesn't mean I'm moving. I'm like, okay, fine. We're still on that story.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so for the next few days that we're there, him and the dad go off for this, tour, swimming pools, and all the fun stuff while I'm, doing work stuff. We head back, and of course, him being a child, impressionable, he's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And he says, okay, he's going to do this. And, it's September time, so we sort of leave it. Remember, I've not found a place to live. We've at least identified school, and we start the application process to get admitted. So December comes along, and pack up the stuff in Dubai, and I go off on my December holidays back to Nairobi. And then come January, I moved to Singapore alone for the first 3 months because I needed to settle accommodation and make sure that, when my son moves, his dad didn't move with us at that time because he had his job. And again, we didn't want to unsettle that. So we set up, so I go for 3 months to at least do the setup, also to figure out this new job, which I'd never done in my life before. And I'm also learning. So it's a lot of things. It's a new team, it's a new boss, it's a new job, it's a new country, it's a new society that's materially and culturally different.
Yeah,
It
there's
would
so
take
many
you
news.
months. Yeah, it would take you months to see an African. It's also super efficient. So it's the first time you're navigating the city with either the train or, taxis or buses. So very different dynamic. And so, I work through going to see houses that are near. Again, you sort of don't know the local dynamics. So,
Yeah,
are you being taken to expat locations? Are you being taken to a place where
yeah.
you'll be isolated and all of that? And I think we were really lucky. The person who was helping me look for a place, I found a really, really beautiful home that was walking distance to my son's school.
Oh,
So that was
wow.
an added, yeah, it was a great advantage. It was walking distance to the bus station. The
Okay.
train station was a bit far, but bus station, so I could take the bus to work.
Mm.
So that was really great from that perspective. I settled to work because in the organization I knew my colleagues, in Singapore. There was also a group of Kenyans who'd gone before me that I had
Um,
worked with in Kenya. So that was also nice. So, I could check in and ask them stuff. Unfortunately, they were men. So there were questions I'd ask them. They're like, actually, I don't know. My wife had to come and Kizanu figured that out.
you're like,
Not
thanks.
helpful. Not helpful.
But let me take you
Even
back
I,
sorry, go on.
no, I said at that point, I said, even I want a wife, that goes and figures out this.
Absolutely. Oh, but I wanted to take you back to the issue of the home search because, as you said, in new places, I had a hell of a time figuring out where to stay in Sweden because I found in Stockholm, because I found in Nairobi, I'm used to the lay of the land and I understand how things lie and how where to go, where not to go, that kind of thing. So in Stockholm, it's not organized in the same way. You have different pockets of different things. And now trying to figure out what is important to me and therefore what I need when I'm moving, and then looking at different neighborhoods and trying to understand what works, it can be quite a process. So did your employer help you with that, or how did you manage that?
Yes, so I was lucky that I got somebody who I was assigned a moving agent, so they helped me that. But I didn't know the lay of the land, so you trusted what the person told you. So there's a bit of, you're going in with blind trust and all of that
Mm.
stuff. So I can't say that when I moved in, I was thinking about the distance to the school. No, I didn't. I liked the place. And then I found out the distance to the school was
Ah.
close enough. I found a place and then I found out it was 15 minutes commute to the office, right?
Nice.
So it was never, there was nothing like, okay, I'll have to be in this neighborhood and then figure that out. But
Mm.
I must say, I then became very deliberate to help colleagues who relocated in terms of helping them think about the things they need to think about.
Nice.
So that was something that I then, really became deliberate about in terms of telling people this is what you need to think
To think
about.
about.
Yeah,
That's super cool because that's actually what happened to me. We did have an agent who was to help us, but the agent didn't do a good job at all. So it was a colleague of mine who had come to Stockholm from the UK, and he'd gone through this whole process himself and had been trying to figure things out. And then he just gave me everything that he'd learned and the things that you need to consider. They're just such details that would never have crossed your mind.
yeah,
And he gave me neighborhoods, and he completely did all the groundwork for me. Then from there it was much easier for me. And in
yeah,
Sweden, I mean, I don't know about Singapore or the other places you've lived. Finding a place to stay here in Stockholm is a bit of a challenge because you have different rules with the different housing associations. I was actually almost not almost I was kicked out. I was staying at a place. So what happened for me, just a quick short story, is that I got 3 months initial accommodation. Then after that, I was meant to find my own. Then I was
mm,
completely stuck. I couldn't find anything. So I asked them, could they please extend for me? They did a little bit. But now because now it was the time, I think it was Christmas time, and I had gone
yeah,
home for Christmas. I just didn't have time to look for a place. So finally, another workmate helped me, and she had a neighbor who was giving out a place. But then which was great, and I moved in there, and it was perfect. But then the my landlord had not had the conversation with her housing association, and then the housing association was not happy because here it's a very strict rule. So whereas I'd had a contract for 12 months, then we reduced it to 7. So then I had this time to then try and look for something else. So it was a really stressful thing that was on top of my shoulders because I'm really trying to figure things out that I don't know much about. But absolutely, all the support I got from my colleagues and just talking to people and walking around was super helpful. Yeah. Mm.
yeah. So I think of all the places that I've lived in, so Dubai and Singapore was where I had to find my own accommodation. All the other locations I was provided for accommodation. But like I said, the agent was really super good. And I know not everybody gets a good agent, regardless of the locations. Super helpful. And we stayed in touch throughout. So also all my lease renewals, he sort of managed and handled that. And I had an amazing landlord. So I didn't, never had issues with where I
Nice.
lived, and I know, that's really great, to have a landlord who's super,
Yeah.
super nice,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it can be really difficult. But again, while the housing rules, they're not as strict as you have to clear with the housing agency and stuff like that. So, Singapore didn't have very stringent restrictions. What they did have is when you can move, who you need to notify, what permits you need to get, and stuff like that.
Okay. So here you are. You at least you have help. You're figuring it out. You know where to buy your milk. Are things written in English in Singapore when
Yes,
you're in the
Singapore is
supermarket?
an English-speaking country,
No, okay.
so
Good.
and quite cosmopolitan. So it was really easy and straightforward. And I think also the advent of online shopping had arrived,
Mm,
so you could really order stuff till late and it gets delivered to your door.
nice.
So that was super helpful. And also there's convenience around the corner. So you get out and there's a store next to you. There's a restaurant next to you. So
Nice.
that was helpful. And then remember, I'd been to Singapore so many times.
Ah,
So, I sort of knew my way a little around. And then there was also help around the corner. I could pick up and call people who, some I had worked with in my previous organization. So we were really friends. And so I could ask without fear.
nice.
Yeah.
Very good. So your first 3 months, you're figuring things out. You're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Then the boy is meant to come.
Yes. So I fly back to Kenya,
Yes.
in March, and I, sort of go and I'm like, okay, we've got to go, pack his suitcase. And he's like, Mom, what if I don't like it? I'll want to come back. We're leaving dad behind. So I was like, no problem. If you don't like it, when you close school in June, July, then you don't have to come back. So that was the trade-off I made with him. I
Okay.
did not know how I was going to survive because this is a 16-hour difference time, journey from Singapore to Kenya, shortest flight. So I'm
Wow.
like, I cannot be doing that trip
Yeah.
every week or every month, and I can't even afford it, even if I wanted.
Mhm.
It now becomes expensive. It's not a day trip that's $300. Now you're talking, $2,000 at that time. So anyway, we decide, okay, we're going to do it. And I start researching, what do you do if your child doesn't adjust? And this is the first time I'm moving to a very different society, where you don't have sort of your tribe that you've grown up with, the people that you're used to, cultures that you're used to. So one, I'm adjusting at the same time my son is adjusting.
Yeah.
So and remember, there's all these new things. I'm trying to prove myself at work. I'm trying to figure out how do we get a social network going. At least that was one thing that I had learned. And kids are really great because he landed in, made friends. One of the greatest friends he made after he had come, we went downstairs to the pool. And there's this young chap who was swimming with his dad, and they were having family time. And Singapore, people hang out in families, it's not like Kenya where you're with your mates and, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, please stop going to interrupt that family time. I'm just going to land in trouble and I'm going to be asked questions. But I say, you know what? I'm not going to go and stop him. So I'm sat at the end of the pool and at the other end in the water. And I'm just like, any moment now, there's going to be trouble. So this lady walks up to me. This lady walks up to me and I'm like, let me just start preparing my apology because first of all, I'm just glad somebody's playing with my son.
Yeah.
She's like, with her Spanish accent, she's like, oh, hello, you must be new. Welcome to Singapore. You've got a beautiful son. It's so beautiful to see them playing. And oh my God, I wanted to cry because then I knew there was acceptance. And they went on to be great friends. To me and my son as well. And kids really helped build that network. And, he had really great friends in, the complex or condo we lived in, and also from school. And one of the friends he made in school, they're still friends to date. And they speak every Saturday and Sunday. And I think that's a beautiful friendship, So, yeah.
Nice.
Needless to say, when we were leaving in June, when he was going home for the summer break, I said to him, so are you going to come back? And he said, yeah, Mom, I'm coming back. I was like, oh, thank God. Because I hadn't thought what would happen, if he doesn't come back. I said, that's a problem for that time, So.
Yeah. Which is interesting because what you were doing is not creating the problem. Because if you had kept it in your mind and kept thinking, oh my God, what will you do? I need to figure it out. I need to find a solution. It's like you attract the problem to yourself. But if you let it be, things work out.
It's a real problem that I do know people who either their kids never settled at all, and they're quite miserable, or the adults never settled, or where they had come, as a family, husband and wife, because there's a lot of people who came like me. You just came alone. You would find that one spouse didn't settle, and they were miserable the entire time, and some of them went back to their respective homes. Like I said, Singapore's more cosmopolitan, so there are people who just packed up their stuff and left, and they'd live, one parent with the children, or they'd go back with the children because they just didn't settle and integrate, and that's it's a real challenge when people move, and something that people don't think about, which I think has been one of my greatest learnings around researching and understanding the challenges people find in that community or that country that you're moving to. And there are, over time, tools that people can utilize to integrate. Dating myself, there are a lot of Facebook groups that would tell you, how to move into a country, neighborhood groups. So if you move to a neighborhood, they actually had groups, and if you connected and plugged in, you learn so much more from those groups, and you find them quite useful.
Nice. I love that you do the research. So it's not just I'm going to let the chips drop where they're going to drop. You are wondering how your son would adjust, and you read up on it, tried to figure out the best ways to help him, let him be himself. That just sounds so wholesome.
Yeah, again, please don't give me too much credit, because some of these things you learn on the go, and you learn from making mistakes. So a lot of these groups I got to get into like month 7, month 8, because that's also when people tell you about them, right? And then you use this to teach other people who are moving, and you're like, oh, there's this group, join it. There's this group, join it, and stuff like that. So again, the only place I ever researched was Singapore.
Okay.
All other locations I'd never bothered to research, right?
Okay.
I sort of just moved. Even my first move to Dubai, I didn't research. I just moved, and I was like, I'll figure it out.
Yes.
But one, by the time I'm moving to Singapore, I'm much older. I've got responsibilities, so you sort of are not. Let's see how this happens. You have to be a bit more thoughtful in terms of
Yeah.
how you're going in.
Mm.
You don't just move with the pay that you're given. You have to think about, will I be able to afford living in that country? So you've got to research what are the pay grades that your colleagues have, and where do you need to land so that you can be comfortable, and adjust or live the kind of life you're used to at a minimum.
Mm.
Because if you go and you find that it's too
Yeah.
expensive or you can't afford to leave, that's actually one of the drivers to people struggling to settle in a country.
And where do you find the information? You're making me think back of when I was moving here. Because you've said something interesting. How much do your colleagues there earn? And for me, actually, I ended up having to speak to a colleague because I felt that I had done the research online just trying to figure out what is the cost of living in this new country, how much do things cost, what is their tax, what that kind of stuff. Then I ended up having to speak to a colleague, and it's very rare, but I got a very candid feedback, and he told me that he didn't tell me then, but he told me like a couple of years ago, this is what he was earning, to just give me a kind of benchmark idea of what it is like living here. And the other thing in Stockholm in particular is that information is strangely easily available. You can actually find online, if you really, really want it, you can go and get, you can pay a fee and get information on how much people are earning, which is super strange. And you can
Wow.
also get information about how much people earn in a certain neighborhood. And you also have like information from unions. We have a lot of unions here. So they give you information about the rate of pay for people within the union within different brackets. Of course, that piece I didn't know before I joined, but at least, as you said, it's important to get that kind of idea so that you know you're not going to be eating salt.
Yeah. So we didn't have that, or I didn't know if it was available in Singapore. And what I did is I asked a colleague of mine, and I said, hey, I need help. What's the average cost of rentals and stuff like that, because different neighborhoods had different rentals and depending on what you wanted. But he had moved, I think, 2 years before, and we had been, good friends. So I said, give me a range. And obviously he gave me a range. And this was different because there were, this has since changed, but there were different options. If you moved as a transfer, or, as a long-term assignment, it was sort of, the organization paid for your accommodation and certain adjustments. But I was moving on a local contract. So, what you get is that's it. You figure it and live it on your own.
Yep.
And can I just say, there are a lot of people who don't like this. Personally, give me my money, let me figure it out. Because if I need to move to the next job, I'm paid on that pay. A lot of people are happy with their allowances, but if you move to an organization that doesn't have these allowances, you won't get them, and you can't tell them I need those allowances. If they don't exist, they don't exist, So I spoke to my colleague, and my colleague was really generous enough to tell me, so this is sort of the range. I did a 10% markup to say, I'm sort of hoping to be here. Of course, you end up with a lot of back and forth, because I think at that organization, they said they'd always cap your increase at 30%. Now, obviously, if you're moving from certain countries, your earning capacity is much lower than, your colleagues in that country, because the cost of living there is higher. And these are some of the things that drive discrepancies in terms of pay, right? Because you have policies that don't take into account some of this, some of these challenges. So we had to do a lot of push and pull to be able to say, okay, that's fine. You've got this cap, but I'm going to be paid less than my peers who will be doing the same job. So the conversation really changes to one of equity, as opposed to, this is the amount that I need. And again, even over time, you realize you still came lower than where you should have been, just through the policies of the organization.
And I do think that is common. And I like what you're saying, this encouragement to take a stand and to also just try different things, to try it with different levels. As you said, you moved into equity. So just find if they have an artificial wall here, then find another angle that you can try and maneuver.
And
be good.
And I think one of the other things, sure, is culturally as Kenyans, the concept of sharing, sort of your earning range is, top secret. You're about to
Yes,
die if you don't share it.
exactly.
Nobody's asking you for how much you're earning. They're simply asking you for a range to enable them settling.
Yeah.
And I know a colleague of mine who moved, and I was like, man, you're feeling like you're rich because, your pay, you're getting a 40% increase, but you're going to struggle. You're
Ah.
outside what you should be earning to be able to settle in the
Mm.
country. And just that information, because the reality is you move in and you're like, oh my God, I'm suddenly a millionaire. I'm like, please don't get excited about that. It means nothing, you're really going to struggle. And so for me, one
Absolutely.
of the things, having had the privilege of people being very open and willing to share and tell me, consider this range, think about this is what I've learned. I've extended the same to others. When people move, I tell them now, whether they listen to you is a materially different thing, because we've got this thing as Kenyans that, if I push back and I say I want more, the opportunity to be taken away.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if the job is yours, it's yours.
I love
They may not
it.
like it. They may not like the fact that you're pushing back. And because I think we were shamed into not asking for more, we feel
Yeah.
the need to stop. And for me, I'm like, if they take it away, it wasn't meant to be mine. And
I
it's as
love it.
simple as that.
I
Because
love
you go
it.
and take that job and you'll be suffering. For what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that's a statement of privilege, but I think from my experience, it's one where I've learned to be able to just say no and walk away. A friend of mine keeps laughing at me and telling me there's a job I'd interviewed for, and we sort of disagreed on the pay, because I felt taking a 60% cut just wasn't it, even though it afforded me the opportunity to move back home, which was something I wanted at the time. And I just said no. I said no because I was like, it's just not right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I said no. So anyway, another colleague got the job, and that colleague bought a Porsche. And so my friend came and said, "Man, you said no, but so and so bought a Porsche. What do you mean?" So then I had to remind her and say, "Do you know people take loans to buy
Yeah.
cars? One.
Yeah.
Number two, you don't know how many side hustles the person has. So don't assume that people
Yeah.
can afford these things purely from pay. There's a lot of other stuff that are in
Absolutely.
consideration. But that stays with me, because then people are like, you should have taken it because you could have afforded this. But for me, no.
Ah.
Right? So
And then as the comparison is the joy of thief, is the thief of joy. So whatever
yes.
they're doing, who knows why they're doing it and how they're doing it, and if it's good for you. If And the other thing I want to say is also that it's like you're, again, in the manifestation realm, if I call it that, in stating that you shall follow up with your worth. This, according to me, is what my time and this is how I value myself. Either you can match it or you don't. If you do not match it, then we were not meant to be. And I really love that. I know it is a point of privilege, but it's also something I think a lot of us don't put ourselves out there for. We, as you said, I think there's something culturally, as Kenyans, as Africans, we've been trained not to be too much, not to ask for too much, and especially as women, you're told, no, 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 what you're getting is enough. Don't rock the boat. Just be good. Just be quiet. Whatever you have is already great. You can buy your milk and bread. You're fine. But what if you want croissants?
I know.
There's nothing wrong with wanting croissants. You can have better than your milk and bread. And asking for it is, you also telling yourself that this is something that I feel I am bringing in, that I am worthy of it. So we need to shake ourselves into a bit of discomfort and ask for a little more. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sort of brings me to my next transition,
Mhm.
coming back. So I I went through this season where I started getting restless and wanting more, wanting different. I had an amazing role, amazing job, amazing colleagues, amazing team, but I was restless. I felt, man, I don't feel challenged. I feel like I know it. And I also feel, I think one of the bigger things was I felt I was stifling my team. I had
Ah,
wanted them to be greater and bigger than me, and move on. And I kept feeling if I'm there, they can't do. So, I'd give them meetings to go to. But in doing that, I started feeling unfulfilled. And the other thing was like I was so homesick. Because remember this was COVID season, we'd gone through all of that, and I'm like, I just want to be near home, and that was a factor of isolation because Singapore had very strict COVID protocols. So, I really started having that yearning. I asked the organization if I could do my job from my home country. My boss was supportive, but I had to take some. There were adjustments I would need to take, right? So, for example, I was told that I have to be paid same salary as the person, the head of the function in that country or back home. And I was like, ain't the same job. I've got responsibility over more countries. This person have a responsibility over one role. And I said, maybe give me that job if you're going to ask me to take that, right? So anyway, long and short is I didn't move, right? So then I started saying, okay, I did an exercise in that season, and that exercise was writing down who is Irene, what is my worth, and it was the first time I'd ever done it.
Nice.
So I went and I've got an A3 size book. That time I had a whiteboard in my study, so I got a book. I'm a creature of writing. It's something about pen and paper.
Yes.
So I wrote, I said, what are my skills? What am I great at? What am I good at? And how can I articulate it? And it was a self-evaluation. And I'd go to sleep some days. I remember like, oh, I did this. I wrote it down. I tried to remember big projects that I did over my career and what was I great at professionally as well as socially, and how I transferred the skills across the professional and social realm. And then I said, okay, if I want to do something different, what does that something different look like? I'd spent most of my career in banking. I said, one, it would be great if it's outside of banking. So that was the first thing I said. It would be great if it's outside of banking. Second thing, do I still want to be in legal and compliance? And I was like, oh, yes, I'm still open to that, legal and compliance. And I said, if it's something different and people are willing to take a chance on me, I'm also open to doing it. So I was also willing to move into sort of the commercial side of things, whether inside the organization or outside. So I was quite open to that. Third thing I looked at was, where would I want to live? Now, remember this is, COVID season, and COVID protocols in Singapore stayed up until the beginning of 2023. So the lens I had in mind at that time was the protocols are similar to what is in Singapore. So where is it less than, where I'm not going to feel really constrained? And then the second thing for me was, I really wanted to be near home. I can't explain it, but I wanted to be near home. So I had a short list of countries. Because the first time I hadn't enjoyed being in the UAE, UAE was sort of at the bottom of my list.
Okay.
I sort of looked at going to the UK and I fell short. Like, those were my two options. Then I said, you know what, South Africa or Kenya. I sort of added a few countries. Then I said, just remove this requirement of which country.
Okay.
Because if the role is exciting, why are you limiting yourself to which country? Just,
Yes.
So then I said, okay. And how do people get jobs? I said, you go in and make applications, or you find headhunters and recruiters. Okay. Do you know any headhunter? Absolutely not. First of all, where do you find them? And so I started that research of finding headhunters and, making connections with them. And then, as everybody does, I went and I looked at my CV. I actually looked at somebody to help me rewrite my CV based on what I had written as my profile. Remember, I'd done that maybe 3 months before I started this exercise.
Okay.
I said, this is what I think of myself. These are my skills. How do we translate that into a CV that's short, concise, and clean? And then I also changed my LinkedIn to a paid version. And I also put out that I was looking for opportunities. And for 2 years, nothing happened. We had conversations.
So you put this out when you were in your same job?
Yeah. And
was that
please remember, no, but there are versions that are not visible to everybody. They're only visible to recruiters, right? So that's what you do. And, to be fair, I well regarded in the organization. I was not under disciplinary. I was at the top of my game. Nobody was pushing me out. I was just restless, right? I was restless and I wanted something different.
Yeah.
And so, for 2 years, it was the dance with organizations, with recruiters. I did interviews. And I started looking at them as practice. I said, I'm practicing for the ultimate role that will come. I'm able to have the conversations. I'm able to sell myself. I'm able to talk about what I've been able to do, who I am. And so we did that. 2 years, I was like, I'm tired of this stuff. We're not going to focus on my role. I'm just tired.
You had it.
I've had it. So I said, okay, now we focus. I'm going to harass my boss until he gives me something additional to do in terms of what it is that I'm doing. And we had that conversation. And so they were busy working through, what options can we give Irene? And, there were conversations around, are there other opportunities? Can you move into the commercial side of business? We really did have conversations and they were looking out for me.
Yep.
And then out of the blue, another organization reaches out on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, great. Interview 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I was like, wait a minute. First of all,
yeah, that's a bit much.
in my head, because I'd not seen this role online, I said to myself, this one is one of those roles. They're like, oh, we needed to get somebody different on the position. So, come along and be in the process. I remember asking the recruiter, I said, hey, how many of this do I have to do just so that I'm clear? And they say, oh, actually, if you do well in this one, you're going to be speaking to the president next. I said, okay, cool. Did my interview. It was a conversation. Next thing, I'm speaking to the president, and next thing I know, we went through the process and they made me an offer. And I'm incredibly lucky because I absolutely love the organization. It was an opportunity in the UAE, and it was time to move again. Again at the end of the year. So I worked till December of 2022, and I think I served my notice in full. So mid-January of 2023, I made the move to the UAE. Again, I'd done my research. I'd spoken to people in the organization. I'd spoken to people living in the UAE to see the cost of accommodation, understanding a little bit where is the office I'm going to, how far do I want to live. I'd done my research to be able to understand where I needed to come into. I work for an organization that believes in equity. So, you're not struggling with people are trying to box you into a certain space.
Yeah. But I want to take you back, I want to take you back to the interview process, because I think that's also very interesting. I like two things. First, that you had 2 years of practice. You call it 2 years of practice, because a lot of people would get disheartened within those 2 years and say, I'm not doing this anymore. Then you had like 5+ rounds of interviews for this particular job. How do you keep the momentum? How do you tell yourself that I'll keep going at it and keep presenting the best of myself without telling them, take it or leave it, I'm not doing this anymore?
One, understanding that you need the job or you want the job. So, you're not going at it with that attitude of take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Number two, I chose, after the first few disappointments, I chose to look at this as a learning and also an opportunity to get to know people. So if you're interviewing and even if you don't get the job, remember you're meeting a CEO, a head of compliance, and you never know where the opportunity comes in the future. Beautiful. So you have to present the best version of yourself, right? So that they remember you as somebody that, they really enjoyed speaking to. And there are people that I connected with, even though the interview didn't go great, and we speak, even though that opportunity didn't come. We still speak and are in touch, because the essence was you presented the version for yourself. You were just not the fit for the organization at that time.
Perfect. I absolutely love that. The idea that it's not that the organization doesn't have a bearing either on you or your ability necessarily. I mean, or at all. This is just saying that in that space, they did not find that you fit that organization. It doesn't mean that you're a poor employee or you're a poor person or that there's anything about you that's off. No, it's just space and time that didn't work out for that particular engagement. I think that's a really nice message for people who are looking for jobs, struggling to take back and not get discouraged by the process. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, as we have now, I have to give my son the message that we're leaving Singapore, where he absolutely loves and is thriving, living his best life.
Oh.
And boy, did that child cry. And at this point, he's 11 going 12. We've done 5 years in Singapore.
Wow.
And I'm like, we absolutely have to live. This is not a choice. And also because of immigration laws. Yeah, because of immigration laws in Singapore, you don't get permanent residence unless you apply. It's a whole process. So I didn't want the uncertainty as he went into senior schools where he wasn't solid. Anyway, he also takes the opportunity to tell me, well, that's fine, but I'm not moving to Dubai. I'm going to Kenya to live with my dad. And I was devastated. 5 years of seeing the guy every day to you have to move and you're not going to see him. So I had to accept. He was also getting into teenagehood, so right adjustment. And so he moved to Kenya while I moved to Dubai. Uh, 1 year of adjustment, and I think now we've adjusted. I go home often enough so that I'm able to see him. He's thriving back in Kenya, has made a new network of friends in school.
Oh,
The social network at least still remained because we went home often enough, and some of the friends visited us. So at least the social network still existed.
yeah.
And so settling in Dubai has been a lot easier, materially different experience from before. And the society has changed and evolved. I'm slowly finding a social network that's outside of work, meeting Kenyans, also integrating through the Rotary Club, of which I've been a member for very many years. So continuing to serve that. So I joined the club, and I'm, serving in the club as well, in an official capacity. So those things help to anchor, finding church and being able to go to that church, so that, over the years, having moved, you learn the things that are really important to help you settle in the community and,
Yeah.
feel that like you belong. And also having a job that I absolutely love and enjoy, and that is not
Beautiful.
in banking.
How incidentally, how did the activity of your A3 translate into the position you have now? Did all of those pieces and information play a part in your finding yourself where you're seated now?
Yeah, so one, it was a different country, UAE. I didn't know what to expect when I moved, but I told myself it's close to home. It's now, a 4 hour journey heading home, so
Yeah.
not a 16-hour journey. You've got far more options to get you home, in terms of airlines than you did in
Yes.
Singapore. Um, I still use my legal and compliance skills in the role that I have. It's not banking, but I do work closely with the banking sector, so that knowledge is not totally lost. The thing also that people have to learn is, as you're moving, my previous roles when I moved to countries were within the same organization. So what followed me was the credibility I had built over time. So moving
Mm.
to Dubai, the one thing was new team, new people, new organization. And they're like, yeah, yeah, you were that, but new industry. And so just rebuilding your name.
Yeah.
I think that for me has been where I've done the most heavy lifting and not taking for
Beautiful.
granted. So you're learning the organization, you're learning the industry, learning the organizational culture, and you're building yourself. But at the same time, you're guiding the team that's done this job longer than you.
Wow.
And so just that balance, has been an evolution, but you slowly get there.
Nice. Can I ask you something? How do you in working with a team that has been in that area for longer than you, how do you go around finding the balance of how to guide them? How do you work that out, like practically? What day two of the job?
I think one of the things I learned in my practice interviews, I spoke to a CEO of an organization where one of their organizational principles was, we're a listening organization. And she
Nice.
helped me understand that you have to just stop and listen, even if you think you're the expert. Um, I
Wow.
haven't been a great listener in my life. And I've had to practice and exercise that. So just listening a lot and picking what is said and unsaid, because both said and
Mm.
unsaid is really important. And then just learning by reading and understanding, and then utilizing more the leadership. So trusting the team to do stuff and just being the leader that guides, unlocking what you need to. You get it wrong sometimes, incredibly wrong, and other times you get it right. And it's just learning and accepting that that's going to be the journey.
That's so powerful. And listening to this whole story, as in everything that you're talking about, your whole journey has been a journey of trust, including self trust. You've trusted
Yeah.
yourself to just land on your feet wherever it is that you go, trusting the people around you, trusting your family. It's, it's, it's very encouraging. I mean, I move easily, but then I don't have, I'm not married and I don't have children. So in my case, it's more a case of what do I feel like doing? But I
Mm.
absolutely love the deliberate processes that you've been taking in determining what to do, how it fits. And I also like something that you said that I find really interesting. You have like a restless what do I call it? Like every so
Syndrome.
often you reach, yeah, every so often you challenge yourself to do something super big and super different and probably super complex, and you run with it and you manage it until the place where you feel that you're not learning anything new, and then you start feeling restless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but here we are.
No, but I think it's really good because that lets you grow. Because if you're always just in the same place, then you're not really growing. Then your life is just flat. This has
Yeah.
enabled you to do such dramatically different things in dramatically different places.
And I think one thing to say, because in my experience, have not been able to do all of these things because of me.
Mhm,
There is an incredible support system behind a lot of the moves I've made.
mhm.
People willing to make this work for you socially. My son lives with his dad, but he's not alone. I've got family that supports. I've got friends that support, that make sure, he feels included, even if his mom is not around. On the professional side, I've got people I can reach out to and go like, man, I'm struggling with this. And they're like, Irene, you're the problem. You need to check yourself.
Wow.
And that's often hard to hear, but learning to trust and be willing and be vulnerable to sort of go through that, and also having people who are on your side cheering you and telling you, you'll make it, you'll do this, consider doing that, and incredible mentors. I have really been lucky to have that support system throughout my career.
Beautiful. So where next?
I'm settled for now. I think I'm learning. I think picking up a new industry, a new country, a new organizational culture. I'm still in the learning phase. 2 years and a couple of months in, I still know nothing. And so, let's see where this journey takes
Nice.
me. I stopped saying I'm here for X period of time after my, I think, no, a US stint, because what I do is I used to really be clinical about, I said I'm here for 4 months. I'm not extending even by a month. And now I'm of the view of, let's see how long this adventure lasts, and then we see where it takes you next. Who knows? Next year somebody may come with
Beautiful.
something different. I'm like, I'm out.
That's a thing.
So yeah, or a different country comes along. So
Yeah.
I now keep an open mind and say, let's enjoy the journey and see where we land later.
I love the mindset and I share it. In I get a question quite often in Stockholm, in Sweden, just people, and it's just a general conversational question. How long do you plan to be here for? And my answer is often, as you said, if something else comes up, I'm not looking to move, but if
Yeah.
something else comes up somewhere else and I'm interested in it, I'll jump on the boat. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Your story is absolutely inspirational. I was taking notes, and one of the things that I think were worth underlining were, well, everything you said is worth underlining. But the things that I think are super important, you kept coming back to the community, social network, that is paramount in being
Yeah.
able to settle in any place you go. And like you, I've been in Sweden for 5 years, and I think I was very late in figuring out the need of building these networks, and there are solutions. When you look for them, you just find things that just keep coming
Yeah.
up your way, little different groups that do little different things. So you absolutely need that if you're moving and need to and are trying to ground yourself. You mentioned twice about self-reflection, which I thought was super, again, super formative, super important in terms of living this life actually. If you don't take a stop and realize, like in your case, that you felt that you were restless, you felt like that you were not being a good fit for your team, you're not leading them in the way that you wanted to lead them, needed something else. In the other case, you sat down and you wrote a lot about yourself. I find that journey of self-reflection is what you need to understand, to even be able to take the feedback that you're saying. When someone says something that touches on your ego, to be able to take that without a fight and saying this is no
Yes.
terrible, don't I? Part of it is that self, because you take that with curiosity. Someone tells you something and you think, huh, you take it in. You don't just put on a shutter and say, forget it, go away. You take it in. And I thought that was absolutely great. Um, Listening, that one I've underlined with a star. I love, and the idea that you got that input from a CEO during your practice
My
period,
practice season.
your practice season, first goes to show how those, I've never really thought about it, of just, a friend of mine used to tell me that you should just interview to keep fresh, to just keep fresh and understand what's going on. But to be able to get such a gem, I think, is
Yes.
absolutely priceless. Yeah, priceless. And it's probably also your open attitude to being a lifelong student, perhaps, that ever since you started your management trainee session, you've just been
A
learning.
student. We try.
Yeah, which enables you to be open, and it's really, really beautiful. Do you have some last guiding thoughts that you'd have to give if someone were telling you that they're thinking of moving but they don't really know if they should or what to think about? Any last thoughts for them?
I think for me is to just say that just stay curious. A lot of times we think that beyond a certain point we can't turn back. I have experienced places where people sign a contract and they're supposed to start, and 2 days before they tell you I'm out. And you've spent so much time recruiting. I'm not advocating for people to do that. What I'm saying is be curious enough to go through the process. Read up and ask questions about the location that you're trying to go to. And also be clear why you're moving. A
Mm,
lot of times we just say, oh, I'm tired of this country and that's why I'm moving. Um, Sometimes that's not reason enough. You need to understand yourself most importantly, because your country will not miss you when you move, but you're the one that will struggle. They won't even notice that you moved,
yeah, true.
right? So if you're not clear your reasons for moving and making sure that that new location fulfills those reasons, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah,
And despite me explaining this, doesn't mean that there were days I was like, did I make the right decision? How many days that I had that self-doubt, right? It's not
yeah,
always been, oh, we get in and it's plug and play. There are times you
yeah,
sit and you're like, whoa, is this the right call that I made, and all of that. And so you keep having that, but you have to remind yourself, what was the why of wanting to move,
yeah.
right? So yeah.
Beautiful. And I'll also emphasize the role that family plays, family
Absolutely.
support. Yeah, in your case, it looks
Absolutely.
it's completely seamless. I had, in terms of my own relatives, I had the background of also, my dad also traveled quite a lot. So it wasn't such a strange thing that you're moving from country X to country Y. And personally, within myself, because I'd lived in France when I was young, it wasn't a strange thing to move out of my home country. So when people ask me, but how could you? How did you manage? How It's not a question I understand because it's not an experience I had. For me, moving is something that people do. But then there are, of course, a lot of people there who would be told, oh, but don't move that country. They're terrible. They're going to do this, that, and the other to you. Do the research, figure it out. And as you said, I
Yeah.
think it's important to have your own reason, your own inclination, your own, to first start with you and what's important to you before moving out to what others think and what they want. Yeah.
And that point about what others think, take take the feedback, but take it with a pinch of salt, especially when you're
Mm,
making that decision to move, because everybody's experience is not the same. There are people that didn't thrive in Singapore, and there are people that absolutely thrived in Singapore. It's the same country, same experiences, but how they experienced them was very different. But
yeah.
a lot of people will ask you questions of, why are you not settled? Just when will you come back? What is this business of staying overseas? And
Yes.
everybody on their journey, everybody's on their journey, man. And so, yeah, maybe you like the comfort of being in the same place. I get restless of being in the same place.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you ask me, I think, when we were chatting earlier, you asked me, what next? And I said, look, I really do want to settle back home eventually and retire there. But if somebody comes with, oh, can you try this? I'll be like, it sounds interesting. And I'll be curious enough to move. Doesn't mean that I don't have a plan or that I particularly dislike home. But it's just everybody has a different perspective of why they move and what moving feels like for them. And so when it comes to that and the comments that people make about you moving and stuff like that, I think you have to make it work for you rather than taking that as the gospel of truth and how that has to work out. And they'll always have an opinion.
Absolutely. And regardless of what you do, there'll be the person who has the opinion of why you shouldn't move and why you should move. So better to know your
Absolutely.
own yeah, your own path.
Absolutely. Yep.
Lovely.
Absolutely.
This has really been great, Irene. This conversation, everything about it, you're very inspiring. I think I need to tell you that.
Oh,
And
thank
you're
you.
perfect, perfect. I've loved the conversation. I've loved this time with you. I feel happy. I feel light. I feel a
Oh,
nice,
thank you. Thank you, Shiro. Thank you. Thank you so much.
cool. Then we'll say, tell our viewers, thank you so much for watching. This is Irene. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thank you. And bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Oh.